Welcome to Smarter Selling in a Virtual World. My name is Robert Bell. I'm Executive Director of World Teleport Association. If you're not familiar with us, we are in the business and have been since 1985 of advocating for the interests of teleport operators, the independent operators that are the backbone of satellite communications and other services around the world, and also promoting excellence in operations, in technology and business practices among those companies so that everybody wins, customers, partners, and of course the teleport operators themselves. We're going to be talking today about the topics of a report published in September of this year, Smarter Selling in a Virtual World. And if you're in the business of having to actually make revenue appear, you'll know exactly what we're talking about, the big difficulties that were faced throughout this pandemic, which is, we hope and we pray, is in its last stages. After a brief introduction from me, I'm going to share some key insights from our report and then have the pleasure of introducing our panel for a discussion about the specifics of how exactly do you do this smarter selling in a virtual world. Both the original report, Smarter Selling, as well as this webinar are made possible by the sponsorship support of Integrasys, the Spanish company that has been instrumental in finding ways to automate and to standardize the process of starting up networks and monitoring them over time. So I'll be looking forward to hearing from them. And finally, I would be remiss if I did not thank 5 companies for ongoing support throughout the year that allows us to publish our research reports and produce these webinars. We call them WTA Industry Leader members, and they are Eutelsat, Intelsat, Kratos, Liquid Intelligent Technologies, and SES. So, smarter selling in a virtual world. What do we take away from that? What did people tell us? Because our research reports are all based on this idea that we talk to our members and find out from them, they're the experts, on what's going on in this business is going to be of fundamental importance to this business as well as to all the other industries that teleport operators connect to. So one of the first takeaways was that this virtualizing of the sales and customer service experience, well, that was already underway. It was already underway like a lot of things, including, for instance, the manufacture of vaccines. But the pandemic gave it a major boost, whether we felt ready for it or not. As one IT executive said, it would normally take us a year, maybe 18 months to plan and implement the work at home policy. We did it in 2 weeks because we had to. That was certainly true of our industry. This drive to customize the customer experience using digital tools and provide digital tools that offer new capabilities has benefited, of course, the vendors involved, whether they're service providers or technology vendors, but it's also been a big benefit to the customers. And that tells us that these changes are going to stick, because anything that helps, of course, you want to keep doing more of. It's also had the benefit for service providers of empowering their intermediaries, the various companies that they work with to implement a service and to maintain it, to drive greater growth in sales. And the reason for that is that these tools increasingly make the intermediary's job easier, more efficient, more productive. And that's a powerful contributor to growth. However, it is not time to throw your suitcase out, because quite clearly that person-to-person connection that we get by actually going and seeing people at their offices or facilities, or of course meeting them at trade shows, that's never going out of style. I think somebody summed it up nicely when I read recently, who said, you need to meet people once, maybe twice at least, and after that, you can have a relationship with them online. But starting up relationships purely online, it's been a high mountain to climb. And lastly, and something that I think we probably least expected when we started on this research, was the degree to which the executives we talked to really put this issue of employee burnout right at the top of their priority list. Everybody knew that we were working in new ways, in new places, having to pivot very, very fast to maintain what we already had, as well as to create new things. And big strain on the people who have to actually make that happen. So it's something that I think is a positive for this industry, that concern about it was there from the beginning, and some of the strategies that were put in place to control it, to reduce it, have been critical to success. So our panelists for today include Alvaro Sanchez, who is the CEO of Integrasys, the sponsor of this webinar, as well as a very big technology innovator in their particular space. Scott Sprague, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Isotropic Systems, the manufacturer of a multi-orbit beam-forming satellite antenna that just recently made some very big news. Stephen Tunnicliffe, who is the Senior Vice President for Global Sales at ST Engineering iDirect, that great company built out of iDirect and I have ST Engineering and Newtek that's making big strides in technology around the globe. And finally, Ajaya Kumar Tripathi, who is the VSAT manager at DETASAD, which is an IT company in Saudi Arabia. So I want to begin first by asking each of you gentlemen to briefly introduce yourselves and your companies. Tell us what you do, which will help us sort of understand the context for the remarks that you make. So Alvaro, would you go first, please?
Yes, absolutely. I'm Alvaro Sanchez. I'm the CEO of Integrasys. Integrasys is a fast-moving company that we tend to innovate significantly, but focusing on the customer requirements, on the customer needs, problems, and what solutions can we build in order to solve those problems with solutions in that regard. That brings automation, that brings simplicity of use in order to make satellite more streamlined. Whether it's automating in the design phase, deployment phase, maintenance phase, or interference vector mitigation, and etc. So it is something that we have been done since 1990, already 31 years, and we continue to do with passion and effort throughout the team. That now it's not only in Spain, we are now having offices in Indonesia, in Dubai, and in Washington, US. So it's an exciting growth path and more tools, more happy customers, and more solutions every year. So I'm extremely happy to be here with WTA.
Thank you, Alvaro. Yeah, it's been quite a ride. 30 years. I can't believe it's been 30 years. Stephen, would you care to introduce yourself and your company to us?
Yeah, certainly. So my name is Steve Tunnicliffe. I'm the Senior Vice President for Global Sales for ST Engineering iDirect. I personally have been in the company for now just over 14 years. So I joined, as was then VT iDirect or iDirect, owned by ST. And a few years ago, ST Engineering acquired Newtek, and we've been obviously going through a process of integration between the two companies. We are a ground segment manufacturer. We also provide turnkey solutions to our customers across a number of vertical markets, very mobility orientated. So aero and maritime are key verticals for us, but we work across various vertical markets. Yeah, so very happy to be here today and talk on this great topic. And obviously, I work with all of the various speakers today in different capacities.
Well, thank you very much, Stephen. Yes, we'll be finding out just how closely you do all work together. Scott, would you introduce yourself and the company?
Yeah, sure, Robert. Thank you very much. Scott Sprague. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for Isotropic Systems. As Robert mentioned, we're developing a multi-beam, all electronically scanned terminal that can connect to multiple orbits simultaneously, which we just demonstrated a few weeks back with a partnership with SES, which I'll talk about during this call. Also, been in the industry for a while now, as that picture will attest, because I think that was like either my high school picture. My hair's a lot grayer and my beard's a lot grayer than it was back then, but it's a great industry that we're in, and the partnerships and relationships I think became more important than ever, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But we've done a lot of work with ST. We're working with Alvaro's firm, and things are still progressing even in a difficult environment. So appreciate all the support we've got from our partners.
Absolutely, Scott. You know, there's a trend in our business. I've noticed that the photos keep getting younger and younger as the people get older and older. I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
Ajaya, would you please introduce yourself and your company, please?
Yeah, hi, I'm Ajaya Tripathi. I'm working as a VSAT manager in DETASAD. I'm in SATCOM industry for last almost 20 years, in the kingdom for 12 years and more. We, DETASAD, we are system integrator and the SATCOM service provider plus IT company. We are providing data center services, cloud services, and many other co-location services in the kingdom. We are one of the early VSAT license holder in the kingdom. I think we are the first license holder. We have started automating our processes, especially with the help of Integrasys, SatMotion, and SatBeam applications. That's going to be very helpful to our very light customer in oil and gas industry, where we find that customers, engineers, they are very qualified and just need some expert advices, and they can do many things themselves with the help of such a good tool.
So let's get into our discussion. I want to start with really a framing question, right? We've been through a very interesting, going on 19 months. The first question I have is, what have been the toughest challenges in general, you know, of the selling and servicing of customers during the lockdown? What have we all wrestled with? And I think, you know, this is not rocket science. I think we're all aware of them. But let me ask Stephen to go first, because you've got the interesting problem of having to put boxes into people's facilities.
Yeah, absolutely, and I suppose we're, as I said, you know, a global organization. So, so the ability to kind of interface with customers, I think over the course of the pandemic over the last 2 years has been different depending on where you are and depending on the severity of the pandemic in the location that a particular customer is in. So yeah, it has been challenging. I would say that prior to the pandemic, we were already working down a path and looking at ways of doing things like remote installations of our hub systems, for example. Obviously, we work very closely with Alvaro and Integrasys in supporting deployment of SatMotion systems for our customers to aid our customers in the automation, if you like, of commissioning of new VSAT remotes into the network. So we had, I suppose, coming into the pandemic, a number of tools, if you like, that were available to us and available to our customers, and we've just continued, I suppose, to, out of necessity, just continue to develop and focus on how we optimize and do that. But it's no question that has been challenging, because there's nothing better, unfortunately, than that human interaction, that face-to-face interaction when we're doing our installations. But we've naturally worked around it.
Sure. All right, so we've talked about some preparation you've done here and the challenge of working around the essential human contact. Does somebody else want to add sort of another nuance to that? Because I think that those are common experiences across all four of our organizations and people here. What else have been some of the challenges of getting this done during the pandemic?
Yeah, I would just add to what Stephen said, is that, you know, especially in a company like Isotropic Systems, we're a pre-revenue startup, you know, so we're establishing ourselves in the market, if you will, and we literally, you know, closed and ran programs with customers like the U.S. Navy through the DIU without ever meeting a single one of the individuals that was involved in the program, and that, you know, that in itself entailed a number of, you know, fairly sophisticated, you know, technical tests in regards to our lens technology and the modules we were going to put in the terminals to see if they were fit for purpose on a Navy vessel. And we, you know, the program ran longer than expected because of those challenges. Sometimes it was access to facilities to be able to do the testing to move things forward, and you had to find creative ways and partnerships to be able to work through that to stay on track, especially in regards to a company like ourselves, where we've got fairly tight time frame to deliver our product to market. So we had to take some pretty interesting, I would say, decisions in regards to facility management in order to have that balance of, as Stephen mentioned, you know, they also manufacture products, right? So, I mean, at the end of the day, everything isn't remote, and you've got to be able to figure out the balance between how do we get people in the labs, the office, the factories, and also then maintain that commercial face to the customers and move things forward. And it was that very, I'd say, delicate balance and rigorous process around facility management and the health issues for our employees that we had to deal with throughout all this.
Ajaya, you know, you were working in a culture that I certainly don't know very well. It's a unique culture compared with a European or American culture. What were some of the challenges that you ran into working in that market?
The biggest challenge was the biggest challenge was in delivery of last mile, like integration services, like where we had lots of restrictions, travel to customer and safety concerns, and like we had to go through our engineers, they had to go through the test for COVID and prove the certificate, and only they were allowed to access. Those were the biggest challenge, but it gave us one certain kind of opportunity as well, I will tell you, because our in-house team, they started doing some kind of R&D work, like bandwidth optimization. We have adopted now, and we patented ourselves in that. Plus, we adopted to Integrasys this application. We installed, we tested. So those back office work was very productive, but the delivery, like last mile delivery, was very challenging. Yes.
I bet it was. Alvaro, I want to actually go to our next question because Stephen already introduced the name of a product that you make, which when it first came out, I thought, well, why didn't somebody else think of this? But I'm glad you did. About new ways to interact with customers and prospects beside video conferencing. We all did that. We all made it work better than we ever expected. But Stephen mentioned SatMotion. Can you tell us a little bit about that in terms of being a tool to help move a sale or an installation forward?
Yes, absolutely. During the pandemic, we not only started with SatMotion that has been for many years. We did SatMotion API. Then now it is completely built for auto-acquire antennas, whether it's flat, whether it's parabolic, and with just 4 RESTful API commands, it auto-commissions, so you don't need an actual installer. So that last mile challenge is very simplified, as just with an API software included, which it doesn't require a hardware or a chip or a logistic. It's just a plug and play software. It get into the network and start revenue before. So in that regard, it enabled many providers to deploy much quicker, and also with the other product that we pushed very much this year, in budget, we were able to make more out of the same resources in a virtual way. So customers were able to sell more capacity, service, antennas, modems, or anything between with a link budget that optimized the resources, not for only link budget gurus, also for salespeople to use. So at the very same WebEx, very same Zoom, they can actually run the link budget with a customer and get a fully customized report. So in that regard, it makes a much easier sale in a virtual environment, because it's just in the browser and can be used anywhere and is hosted in the cloud. But also it's an enabler to make things happen. As you mentioned, Robert, it is always easier to have a customer that you already acquire and you already know. Sometimes it takes a couple of meetings in person prior to be able to make business with a particular person, because I always say people make business with their friends. And as Scott was saying before, it is a small industry, so it is the network that we have that enable us to make business.
Well, thank you. It's interesting to me that among the people that, or the organizations that you're working with, Alvaro, you have a couple of equipment manufacturers. So you have ST Engineering, iDirect with their modems and wide range of other related products. And then you have this antenna manufacturer, this pre-commercial, that is building something that isn't being sold yet. I guess this is a question really for the three of you, for Stephen, for Scott, and for Alvaro. So what's going on in those relationships that you are able to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. I mean, the relationships, at least for us in a pre-revenue stage, have been critical. I mean, let's take ST Engineering, right? As we move forward here with our terminal solution, we've got to have modem partners and partners in the industry that we can work with to bring our products out to market. And so we've had great collaboration with the ST team, the iDirect team, in regards to working through that process. At the same time, as Alvaro mentioned, and it's one of the challenges I see as we start to move and globalize our business, is our ability to go out and either meet with customers virtually or face-to-face and have the tools in hand for our team to be able to demonstrate the capabilities of our terminals on the various satellite networks, right? So, hey, I have a location in Saudi Arabia. I want to be on mPower, and if I use your 80 centimeter terminal, what kind of performance am I going to get? And if we have those tools, both virtually or face-to-face, and let's use Saudi as an example, right? Today, Saudi is not the easiest place in the world to travel to, and in the normal environment, and in a restrictive environment, it's even harder. So how do we conduct business without those types of online tools that are sort of trusted with across the industry to be able to do that? I mean, one of the challenges we faced as we started working through the performance of our terminals was, as you engage with the satellite operators, how do you start to determine the capabilities of your terminal on their various networks? And some of those networks are in the future, right? They haven't been launched yet. And then be able to articulate that to customers that in some cases you haven't even met face-to-face. So it's, again, being able to put your hands around that data in a constructive, cohesive way that's trusted. And then you can, you move those discussions forward. I don't know, Stephen, maybe you've had similar experiences over the last year or two here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, I would say that needs must. Jan, and so we've gone through this whole process of not to be confused with virtualization, but cloudification in terms of the way in which we kind of interact and communicate with one another. And as you mentioned with yourselves, we've got a number of different work streams running, which, again, have all been done largely virtually, and I'm sure that will ultimately change in a short pace of time, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, the one thing that I would say about the kind of, I suppose, the interactions, the virtual interactions, if you like, and it's not necessarily a good thing, but I think generally we get down to business pretty quickly. With a lot of these kind of, I suppose, interactions, you strip out a lot of what I would call the more personal interaction, which is obviously naturally disappointing, because I think through that nuance you pick up a lot of valuable information and insight into your customers' needs and motivations. But yeah, so I think through these interactions we just get on with the work, so to speak.
Well, it's very efficient, as you say, but it's hard to going back to Alvaro's comment. It's hard to make friends.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think to a point that was mentioned earlier, we've absolutely been leveraging the relationships that we have that kind of predate the pandemic. So exactly. Yeah, so in terms of business development, we need to get to meet people.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. in regards to, you know, these calls are just sort of like, you just get down to it, and you don't have the social interaction that you have if you were all in the office or you're out meeting somewhere at a customer's location. And to your point earlier, Robert, you know, it starts to create burnout within an employee base, right? Because all you do is you get up and all day long you're on video calls just talking about work. Now, I mean, we all want our employees to be productive. We all want to get the most out of our, you know, workforce. But at the same time, there's a bit of a balance there that you had when you were in the office together. And so, you know, as we start to move back into that more engaged environment, I mean, you know, human beings are face-to-face creatures. So, you know, people generate energy from that. And I think Stephen makes a good point there that it was like all work. You know, you get on a call and it's like, boom, let's get down to it.
Well, that's interesting. That's been the Zoom. You know, everybody talks about the Zoom fatigue, and the term always bothers me because it makes it sound like there's something wrong with the technology. And of course, it's not. It's just that we're allowing ourselves to be scheduled wall to wall, and as you say, all business all the time. Interesting. Ajaya, I just wanted, Scott opened up, you know, the country you work in. I wondered if you could talk through us in a little bit more detail, specifically how you worked with Alvaro's company on that last mile problem. I mean, where were the simplifications? Where were the efficiencies that made it easier to get the job done?
Yeah. We have a good customer base in oil and gas industry where we have our technical staff of our customers. They are very smart people. So what we used to do is, like, we had pre-configured modems like iDirect modem, mostly iDirect modems or Comtech or other modems, pre-configured modem. We will ship it along with our say one staff who is already certified, who has the vaccination and everything done. Then SatMotion, that application will provide to the customer, and their engineers, we will guide them remotely, and they were able to tune the antenna, do the 1 dB compression test, and then we used to commission the link from the hub. So that's how it's simplified. We were able to deliver it faster, I will say, as compared to anybody else who might not be having that SatMotion application.
Right, so it's a scary thing in a services business to reduce, if you will, the services that you're providing. And yet, in this case, you have this paradoxical result, which is that it gets done faster. And in many ways, I'm going to guess that the partnership with the customer ends up being strengthened because you're helping them help themselves. Would you agree with that?
Very true.
Yeah, there's another company that I'm familiar with, which I won't name, but anyway, they had a similar experience in terms of last mile. I was actually working with ST Engineering iDirect. They needed to provision service on a whole lot of ships. And that's normally, yeah, we send 2 technicians. We have to do it when the ship is in port. It's immensely complicated to coordinate. And so they just ended up, since they couldn't do that anymore, they ended up coming up with something similar to what you talked about. They came up with a way to provision this remotely over a video conference. They just shipped a whole lot of modems around the world. And it went remarkably well, and it went so well that they're going to continue doing it that way. So, you know, it's one of those unexpected things that come out of it. Alvaro, so that's about self-provisioning using SatMotion. I just want to open that up a little bit further because you have some other, you do allow customers to do some other things as well. You mentioned the auto acquisition, which I found interesting because I couldn't quite figure out, you know, if it's automatic acquisition, what do they need you for? So
that's a good question. So in many cases, they need us for providing the cross-pole interference, the adjacent satellite interference, and also the 1 dB compression point. So in order to do that, normally it takes a lot of time, and sometimes they are not capable with any other solution. It is completely manual process, and typically the service is not as good as leads say, or it should be. So in that regard, we have customers that have told us we have the 95% of the network in the highest mode code, which is only in the edge of the beam when they don't have the highest mode code, which is extremely an excellent result on a network deployment. So it is not only deployment faster, it is not only more automated with even traveling to the site, and also it is to get revenue before, as well as to optimize the links and the capacity you use. So in that regard, it helps significantly service providers like operators. But also we have new tools for automatic maintenance. So whenever something happens, how to fix that remotely. We call it virtual SatMotion. Let's say the sum of the installation. And additionally to that, a few other new tools.
That's interesting. So it's not just a matter of speed, and it's not just a matter of efficiency. It's a matter of not letting the customer troubleshoot what they're doing, instead of having that service call, which is, which chews up so much time and money to fix a problem. You're actually enabling customers to improve their service level. Do I have that right?
Correct. More available and more resilient.
Yeah, it's okay. This is why so many of these changes are going to stick, because that's a significant improvement for everybody. Okay, so we've talked about a couple of these processes. How did what else is going on in terms of new processes, new technologies that allow you to create new networks and install sites in the pandemic? And some of this is just procedural stuff, but Stephen, can I turn to you, because you have to ship and help people with a lot of modems. What else was required to pull that off during this difficult time?
Yeah, so I think well, there's a logistical aspect to it. You're absolutely right. Just very close coordination with our internal logistics team, and I think we're having to, with our customers, naturally having to plan a lot further ahead than we have done historically. Perhaps we've I think from a, I suppose, a historical perspective, we've been able to react, obviously, naturally, very, very quickly. But obviously, given just some of the logistical challenges of moving equipment around and the cost associated with moving equipment around, for example, requires just a lot more planning and preparation. So we're working, I think, much earlier in that process to get product, if you like, out the door. And then obviously, once it's, as I said, once it's reached the customer location, if it's a hub installed, supporting the customer remotely in the installation of that hub. And then the other important element is our technical assistance center, providing ongoing support to the customer in the operation and support of that infrastructure, which is obviously something that we've historically had in place for many years anyway. So it's just a continuation of that, and just really kind of bringing all those different elements together. So yeah, and just leveraging technology as a tool to make that happen, to enable that.
Do you think some of those changes? I'm interested in the planning process thing. Do you think that's going to be? So let's fast forward a year from now, when we've all learned to live with what's left of this pandemic, and another one hasn't yet struck us. Will you still be doing that advanced planning? Were there advantages that came out of that for you and your customers that you'd like to hold on to?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of interaction with the customer, for sure. The other thing that I would say is that whilst we hope to obviously come out of this pandemic, we would consider ourselves potentially to be in a transitory phase of coming out of the pandemic. There are probably, from a logistics perspective, things that will continue to remain for some time. I personally, just being a realist, I don't see the logistical challenges that we all face going away anytime soon. So that's something that's we're just going to have to kind of, I suppose, naturally work through the course of next year. But yeah, in terms of customer interaction. I think we're going to take away a lot of things that we've learned from the pandemic and make them actively part of our practice as a business in terms of how we engage with our customers going forward.
Jay, let me ask you the same. I'm sorry, please go ahead.
One of the things that we think that will remain or at least we see that is a key enabler is one of the main requirements ST Engineering had for us, that it was the virtualization. Other industry partners do ask similar request, which is when you virtualize and you provide a cloud service, as we managed to do with Beam Budget on software as a service, or we managed to do with all the products now to be fully cloud, fully virtualized, you enable the market significantly, so you don't have neither chips stock challenges, neither logistic challenges, and neither revenue challenges based on not being able to deliver and not being able to provide service. So in that regard, it streamlined the supply chain and delivery, which it is critically important these days. So in that regard, we're working significantly with few partners, thanks to being able to provide new business models in terms of monthly fee, as well as to be realized. No hardware, no logistics, no shipping, no waiting, fully autonomous installation. So in that regard, it has been a journey that I think that is gonna stay for long, and most probably longer than we all want.
Well, yes, but that's a very interesting point. Our WTA's Technology Advisory Board is flagging a number of issues for our service provider members to focus on. And one of them is this virtualization. It keeps coming into everything. And you did a nice job there of talking about the advantages that it brings you. For companies that make hardware, it's both an opportunity and a bit of a threat. And then for companies that make antennas, I don't think we're going to virtualize that anytime on a server, Scott. But I want to turn to Ajaya just to talk a little bit about the same question. There are things that you had to do, and you've described one of them in detail. Thank you. Are those going to continue when COVID is in our rearview mirror? And if so, why?
I think this video conference or meeting people over online, this thing will remain there, because many people, they have created the comfort over it. And especially in the sales cycle, if the opportunity or the lead is at awareness stage, this is very easy, quick things to get in touch with our customer, which will of course remain for even after the pandemic. The technologies like SatMotion will remain there because customers, they are liking it. Some of our customers, they are really very, very expert, like they are qualified engineers, although they may not be SatCom engineer. So with guidance, they are doing pretty well, because that's reducing our trouble tickets and our ticket resolution time as well. Those things will remain. Automation, like we during this pandemic, we did lots of digitization and automation. Like before, we used to get the physical copy of the purchase order, POs, to implement, start or trigger the next stage. But now with the digitization, I think we don't need anymore. We consider to go ahead to the next step online.
I personally am looking forward very much to the time when companies in many of the markets that we serve will be willing to accept a digital copy of something called Certificate of Residency that says that we are indeed a U.S. resident corporation. They all want hard copies. It's like, So I'm with you on that one. Scott, you're in this interesting position where you are kind of probably right now inventing the processes that you're going to be using.
Right.
What did you take away from the?
Well, and it was interesting what Stephen had to say, because we're moving from our prototype stage into product introduction. Right, we're on the verge of that. Our first product comes out in the middle of next year. But to Stephen's point, we've had to get much smarter and start much earlier in regards to managing that supply chain. Because we're all, I think, throughout the industry, we're feeling challenges with the supply chain on the chip side and other parts of our business. And the interesting aspect of all of that is as it trickles down to the different parts of our ecosystem, right? The ground infrastructure, the modems, the terminals, the tools, the satellites, right? If, we want to sell a terminal that's going to talk to multiple constellations. If those constellations can't get the parts to build those satellites and get them up in a timely manner, what does it do to our supply chain requirements? And so, we're factoring in all those aspects as we move into new product introduction. If Stephen, for some reason, if they have a delay on the modem side, and our go-to-market strategy is to have a iDirect modem embedded into our terminal, again, how do we collectively manage that? And so we are having to get a lot, I think, smarter, more collaborative, and start earlier in that process than we ever have in the past. And we're seeing that right now in our business.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. That's funny. Despite all the pain I'm sure has been involved, what you're describing is basically all good. It's amazing how under stress we do the right thing.
Yeah, if you think about our industry, and I know, Robert, I know you've talked about this before, but we went from an industry where they built a satellite in a 2 to 3 year time frame. They launched it on a great big huge rocket that cost $100 million to launch, and it was up there for 15 to 18 years. Now they're building satellites every day. They're launching 30 to 60 at a time. They're doing the launch 1 or 2 a month. It's completely transformed the industry, which transformed all the things that we collectively do on the ground. And so it's pretty exciting. I've been in the industry for a while now, as you can tell from the picture and the current day view of Scott. But it's really transformed over the last few years, and I think it's an exciting time to be there. And we've gone, I think we've gone through this challenge with COVID, but we've got to be smart as we move forward here.
Yeah, I think it is probably the most exciting time in the industry, and I'll put up my kindergarten picture at some point so people can see the then and the now.
One of the things on the pandemic is that everybody got weight, lost hair, grew beard, and completely changed. So in that regard, it could be a pre-pandemic picture and a post-pandemic view. So everybody has changed significantly. Not only the tools, also the people.
I like that. I think we need a before or after thing in a matchup for contest for our industry. I like that. Now, we've already talked a good deal about value to customers, but have we missed anything? Because at the end of the day, if the customers value an innovation in technology or process that we introduce, that's going to be, that's going to stay with us. We've talked about speed. We've talked about the ability to actually deepen your partnership with customers because they're engaged in bringing a service online. Maybe they didn't think that they were supposed to do that, but once they do it, they gain understanding and particularly if it was successful. And if we can help them self-diagnose problems and solve them, that's a big value. Are there any other values we sort of take away from, unexpected values we take away from virtualizing, from automating, from actually reducing the human contact in here?
Well, I know we touched on it before about the relationships and everything else, but within at least our company, we've been in a fairly aggressive hiring mode as we've grown the business and we start to go toward production. And it became very evident that the value that an experienced employee has to your business, I think, was greatly increased during this process, right? I still to this day have team members that I've hired that I haven't met face to face. And so if you are a young professional, maybe you're just out of university or you're just starting out and you don't have sort of a Rolodex and years of experience in the business, to join an organization, to be mentored, to be coached, to learn the business and the industry in a virtual perspective, it's more difficult than it had been in the past, where you're sitting almost side by side, shoulder to shoulder with somebody. On the flip side of that, industry veterans that could come into an organization like ours, a newer organization, bring those relationships, that experience, those trusted relationships where they can start making calls and get your products and services in front of customers, that became invaluable. And I really saw that as we went through the last year and a half or so.
And is that?
I think Scott's absolutely correct. You know, just in terms of the value of human capital, it has been so important this past couple of years. Not that it wasn't important before, but just being able to rely on knowledge and networks within that knowledge. Sorry, not a knowledge within the networks is incredibly important and valuable.
Let me just drive a little deeper into that, because that's really an interesting point. So why is it that in this environment in which we can't just run to a show and have a coffee with somebody, why has that increased the value of that sort of experience and expertise?
Well, I think Jay and Alvaro's touched on it before, which is, you know, the commercial relationships are built on trust, right? That, you know, you're going to be a supplier or a vendor to somebody, you're going to follow through, you're going to do what's right by them. They know you and trust you to do that. And if you've established that credibility and you have it, to make those calls in a virtual environment becomes much easier.
Right. Okay. So it's reputation.
You know, that's what I said. I mean, Alvaro and Jay, you know, please jump in here.
I fully agree on the importance of the staff, always and especially now. Now it has been a time to trust the employees, to trust the partners, to trust in general, because only with a very good team that can perform, companies succeed in this situations, rare situations, uncertain situations. Nowadays, my wife tells me something that is uncertainty is here to stay, and it is. We live in an uncertain world, and only powerful, strong teams are the ones that enable to go through different steps and solve different challenges, whether it's the logistics, whether it's the tips, whether it's any other challenge that might come, and solve them step by step. So it is critically important to have a great team and a unified team. I would say it's not only what one person with few contacts can make. It is about a great team working together in one direction.
Thank you. You were going to the question I was going to ask, which is, you know, those key players have always been important and their value rose, but we also need to bring the next generation along and make sure that there is a full team there. And that's obviously harder to do in a virtual environment. Ajaya, do you have anything that you want to add to this in terms of that team building exercise? I mean, Saudi is a relatively young country, I know, so there's a lot of folks who might be looking for opportunities in what you do.
Yeah, this has given us, like, pandemic situation has given us an opportunity to do some kind of introspect within the team members, to look at like who are the guys who are taking more responsibilities themselves instead of monitoring them, and they are interacting with the customer as their own work. And then, I mean, they are aware, they build the relationship. They don't have to meet the customer, like they build the relationships such that they don't have to meet customer, and then they can move ahead with the sales cycle without meeting, with virtual meetings and with personal, like virtual contacts, and get the order or scale up the sales. So introspects were very important, and this is what we did as an organization.
Interesting. So technology, introspection, and planning. I particularly like the planning comment, because yeah, we we tend, because we're trying to get the next thing done, to short planning for the future, and this one brought us up short. Well, we're coming to the end of our time, and we've actually answered, starting from the very beginning of this, all the questions I wanted to ask. Alvaro, do you have any final comments you want to share about this experience? Again, you've had the privilege of working with these three, very skilled and qualified people, as well as their organizations. What has Integrasys taken away from this?
So first of all, I would like to congratulate Scott for being able to make it a smooth business and with USDOD over Zoom. I bet it is not easy. It must be challenging. So yes, you have my admiration. Congratulations. I was impressed with your comment, and being a new company in the industry, literally new company in the industry, it's excellent. You have achieved that so far, yeah, working with these companies, it's a great pleasure. We work very hard on making satellite more streamlined, making easier tools, whether it's for the design of the network within budget that we highly believe that helps significantly on selling, even in a virtual environment, to new customer. That to me is the most challenging environment you can expect for sales. So helping on that, we are extremely proud. Whether it's for VSAT in Saudi, IoT applications, or flat panel services and antennas. For us, is a very great pleasure to work with partners and with friends, and we look forward continuing to work much more with them, as well as with WTA on making reports that help teleports around the globe and health service providers around the globe. Please check the report, as it is an excellent job, completely vendor agnostic and completely tool agnostic in that regard. And yes, again, it's a great pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you, Alvaro. I want to thank all of our speakers, in addition to Alvaro, Scott Sprague from Isotropic Networks, Stephen Tunnicliffe from ST Engineering iDirect, and Ajaya Kumar Tripathi from a company in Saudi with a long name that is abbreviated down to DETASAD, I believe. I probably messed that up for you, an IT service provider company. So it's been a very, very interesting conversation. I really appreciate your time. I'd like, if you're part of our audience, I'd like you to take a moment to fill out our online survey after the webinar. Your feedback does help us get better at this as we go. I'm looking with some embarrassment at this next one about downloading your free copy of your executive summary of the report, because we didn't get it up there. It's my fault. So we're going to be sending that out along with the other content for you to take a look at and learn something more about this topic. Coming up in November 16th, which is very, very soon, WTA will be moderating a panel. That'll be our Membership and Certification Director, Randall Barney, in Bremen, in Germany, on toward affordable terminals, ironing out cost challenges to provide high-speed connectivity at the Space Tech Expo in Europe that takes place in Bremen that week. Coming up in terms of reports, and thank you, Alvaro, for referencing them, we'll be shortly publishing How to Profit from Customers' Digital Transformation, a report authored by Warren Ferster, who's a very well-known journalist in our business, and based upon a lot of interviews with our members. And then coming up in January, we'll be building a better NOC. As it turns out, that Network Operations Center, kind of like the virtualization tools we've been talking about, has become just an even more critical point as we put into place more and more complicated services with higher levels of automation. So how do you keep pace in your Network Operations Center? That brings us to the end of our time together. Thank you very much for your time and attention. We look forward to welcoming you to our next webinar, and I wish you an excellent day or evening ahead.